Corinne Malcolm, rest day, marathon Monday, actually, here in the U.S. How you doing?
I'm good. I know. I was like, I think I pinged you while you were probably like driving to Mendocino or were in Mendocino. And I was like, hey, we should record. There's some news that we got to talk about. So life is good here. Slept in this morning, which felt pretty nice, but I've been in the office ever since.
Yeah. And when you did text me, it was more proof that we're always thinking the same things, because I had literally been thinking 90 seconds previous. I got to get in touch with Corinne. We got to do a rest day. I was on the road for a bit after Gorge Waterfalls, but there was an avalanche of incredible news in the sport recently. I think headlined by the Katie and Germain move over to On. But maybe before we get to that, like I mentioned, it's Boston Marathon Monday here. And the big news this morning was that Des Linden is officially retiring after today's race at the Boston Marathon. And obviously there's always been this chatter that Des is going to take ultras more seriously, going to be pacing at Western States this year. So another step for Des to come over to the dark side of trail running. Are you excited?
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's a lot of eyeballs, right? It's just like the eyeball emoji at like, oh, Des is retiring. Does this mean we finally get her? I think that she'll dabble. I think that, I think supposedly she signed up for Tunnel Hill, which I think would be interesting. Yep. And it's like, is that the 50 miles at a 50-mile attempt? Do we have a group of women lining up for that? That would be really cool to actually have a group of women like all together lining up for that. Or do we convince her to come to Javelina instead and enjoy a party and maybe run some circles in the desert? If you're going to go all in, you might as well just take a big
Heather
swing.
Jackson style, go all in.
Yeah. No, and I think, I don't think Des has been to Western States. She's been out to UTMB before. I've got to imagine that that's going to spark some joy in her a little bit. And all of a sudden, do we have a Des Linden looking at some golden ticket opportunities maybe?
I agree. For the Brooks representatives who will be on the ground there at Western States, I would make it mandatory that Des, bring Des to the golden hour. Bring her to the track for the first finishers, obviously, but bring her to the track for the golden hour. And then most definitely she'll be signing up for a golden ticket race in the fall, maybe Javelina. And then maybe we'll get Des on the start line in Western States. Anyway, we can look forward to that and always, get excited about when she might make a more official trail running debut. But congrats to Des on an amazing career, including 12 Boston marathons, which was amazing.
I was going to say that was a very quintessential, way too early prediction by you and I, and I'm so into it.
Yeah, there you go. We're making Des's trail running race calendar for her here on the podcast. But moving on, Katie and Germain shocked the world really last week. I was very surprised when I learned about this news. I was read in on it a few weeks ago. In fact, you texted me when they put up their Instagram post saying 3 years with the North Face. Everybody kind of scratched their heads a little bit, whether this was a goodbye post, whether there was something new in the works. And, of course, I responded back just with eyeball emojis because I couldn't say anything. I was under embargo, big time embargo, but a very well kept secret and a big surprise to a lot of people. I actually came to learn that On was referring to this whole project under a code name, which I probably shouldn't reveal. I don't have permission to reveal it, but anyway, it was a very well-kept secret. Usually these things, we start to hear rumors about it months and months in advance. So maybe
Jeff Colt, like On Teammate, did not know until Friday evening when Katie texted him a good luck message with a little On kit and was like, it doesn't come out till Sunday. Like, shh, but like, good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, so cool. So maybe just get us started on this. What was your reaction when you heard the news about Katie and Germa?
I was surprised but excited. I think On's in a very different position than they were when Katie and Germain left On. And I think that's what was so interesting, is that there have been very few examples in the sport of trail and ultra running of an athlete leaving for a different brand and then coming back to a previous sponsor. And that's not to say that athletes are leaving on bad terms, right? Like that's generally not what the case is, but I think Hayden Hawks is the only other big example that I can think of an athlete leaving and then coming back. So Hayden Hawks ran for Hoka, left for Ultra, came back to Hoka. Pretty logical moves there. But so I was surprised. And when I speculated that Katie and Germain might be leaving, they're a package deal. I wasn't sure. Knowing a bunch of brands' budgets, I was like, there are only a few options. On has one of the better budgets that like seems like a good fit, but they've already been there. So will they go back? And so I was like pretty convinced that like if they were going to leave the North Face, that maybe it'd be for the French brand Kip Run via Decathlon.
Yep.
And I do know that they've thrown some, as a brand, have thrown some pretty big contract offers at people. And so I was like, maybe that's a logical move for them. French, a new brand in the sports space. Blondine's been running super well. That was maybe my only inclination there. So I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, and very excited for them.
Yeah. I think the thing that was really interesting that they mentioned when I spoke to them on the podcast was how open they were about the fact that the product really wasn't in the place that it needed to be when they left On the last time.
I think that's why they left, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the product wasn't good enough at that point in time. And that's On, I think, would agree with that statement, though.
No, 100%. I think they would totally, stand behind Katie and Germain's description there. But, obviously the brand has grown a lot and the product has evolved a lot to the point where literally two of the best in the world now are coming back with the confidence that the tools that they will be provided will be sufficient for the task at hand to compete at the highest level. So to your point, they didn't necessarily leave because they wanted to. They left because the tools of the trade weren't quite up to snuff, and now they are, and they're coming back. And I think there's a lot to say about the positioning of the brand now and why this might make a lot of sense for trail and ultra running fans who are curious about this, because obviously this is a massive decision for Katie and Germa. Obviously, Katie coming off the Trail Runner of the Year performance last year, a season for the ages, winning both Western States and UTMB, where she broke Courtney Dauwalter's course record. Germa didn't have quite as strong of a season, but we all know he is one of the best athletes in the world, and they come as a package deal. And a huge, huge decision for them. And it made me just like kind of curious, and maybe this would be fun to go back and forth on, to just like think about how the positions of these respective brands may have played into the decision. Also, because like VF, the parent company of the North Face, is sort of in turnaround mode. They struggled a lot. They, divested a lot of assets, and under new leadership, they're starting to gain momentum again. But meanwhile, while TNF is in sort of turnaround mode, On is in hyper growth mode. So I actually went and looked up some of the stats here. So just for our viewers and listeners, the North Face is a $3.6 billion annual revenue brand. On is a $2.6 billion annual revenue brand. So TNF roughly 40% larger. But On is growing 29% a year, while the North Face is growing 2% a year. So just like a tale of two brands and businesses. Obviously the North Face, older, much more established and bigger, but On with a little bit more of this growth momentum, and certainly making massive investments specifically into outdoor and trail. So maybe something that plays into that type of a decision.
I think we all knew post-Olympics that On was going to come to trail with a lot of money. I think that they had to get through the last Summer Games. They had to get through Paris, where they had major investments going on, particularly in tennis and then road and track. Now that they've seen those investments through in a lot of ways, and they are established and they are, kind of big markets for them, coming to trail and outdoor makes a ton of sense, right? That is that next growth opportunity for them. And they're early in the Olympic cycle, which means they do have cash to play with in a different avenue. I think the big difference there too is that, while yes, obviously there is not athleisure, the fashion element behind On with Zendaya, and those partnerships exist just like it does at the North Face. I do think that there's a sentiment maybe between the two different brands where the North Face does have to capitalize a lot on their non-athletic consumer product, i.e., producing more of that Gorp core, but not entry level, but like a lower price point Gorp core for a lot of folks in comparison to something like Arc'teryx, which is very, very, very expensive. On, I think, really does couch itself as a athlete innovation company first. They obviously, I see their shoes everywhere on people casually, but I do think that their innovation team is working overtime to provide the very, very best shoe product to their athletes. And that while I do know people that work on the innovation sides for the North Face, it's like not a slight at all to them. I just think that the company, or I think they are a little hamstrung by the company's need to produce more consumer forward products than On is.
Exactly. So that's what I was going to go to next. You know, like I was just like doing some chat GPT stuff, trying to like interpret the latest earning reports from both On and TNF because they're publicly traded. You can learn a lot about how their businesses operate. And from what I can tell, 90% of On's revenue comes from footwear sales, where the North Face is like less than 10%. One thing that we can be very honest about is that the North Face has a great footwear product now after a decade plus of really...
in a way, finally, right?
Finally.
You were on the North Face when you guys could run in whatever shoes you wanted.
Yeah,
so.
and I've probably mentioned this on the podcast, but yeah, my original contract with the North Face literally said you don't have to run in our shoes if you don't want to. That changed over time, and they've made massive investments there, and with the help of people like Jean-Marc Dejean, created a fantastic footwear product offering, which has been proven. As Jean-Marc used to say, the proof is on the podium. Katie won UTMB and Western States wearing TNF footwear. This new Endurus 4 shoe, I've heard it, which is what Seth Ruling wore at the Black Canyon 100K, is supposed to be a fantastic shoe as well that is, I think doing well in the market. But the fact remains is On is a footwear first company. TNF is an apparel first company who makes the vast majority of their revenue, as you're mentioning here, Corinne, by selling puffy jackets and hoodies, where On needs to have athletes like Katie and Germa to prove out the innovative footwear concepts that they're creating over there in Zurich. So again, two different companies with different emphasis. So you can see why in these types of situations where big decisions are being made by the best athletes in the world, how the positions of these brands figure into what they ultimately decide to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that every brand needs athletes to validate the product. And I think on the North Face side of things, that's the mountaineers and the climbers for the most part, taking the highest level of product into the most extreme environments. And that's On does that by, putting Helen Obiri on, the Boston podium or the Boston win, and having Katie level talent. I know Germain is very talented and is in his own right is a all-star athlete, but I do think that Katie is the pinnacle of trail and ultra right now. And so having her provide validation for their innovation team would be a huge win for them, to have more athletes in the middle of the pack buy On shoes as opposed to Terex shoes, as opposed to Solomon shoes.
Yeah. I wonder too, being European-based, On is a European-based brand in Zurich, where Katie and Germa used to live when Katie was doing her PhD. They're now based in sort of rural France in the Mercantour, but they're closer to the global headquarters for On. And I think for athletes of their caliber, and I can't say that I know them super well. Obviously, I've spoken to Katie and Germa many times, but from what I've heard, they're like meticulous and so professional, detail oriented with how they operate within their respective athletic careers, that proximity to the offices where the product is being made, where their sports marketing managers are, making decisions, that's probably attractive for athletes of their disposition and maybe factored into the decision also. It's not all bad news for the North Face. Obviously, like I said, they've been one of the best brands in the sport and the most committed sponsors into the sport, going back to the earliest days before trail and ultra running was even cool, or this now growing, burgeoning professional market. Jonathan Albin just announced that he's re-signed with the North Face. So a fantastic, reinforcing of their team there in the wake of losing two great athletes. So anyway, TNF obviously losing out on Katie and Germain, but they definitely are making good product. They're making big impact in the market, and, are also re-signing Jonathan Albin to maintain that world-class athlete team that they've had for years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that they'll continue to be a key player in the space. Yeah. Losing a star, losing 2-star athletes, but I think that they've got an amazing team around them, both the North American and European side, but also their reaches into Asia with a number of Chinese athletes in particular and Japanese athletes. Mount Fuji is happening this upcoming week. So I do think that there's a kind of a continued buy-in for the North Face to be a key player in trail.
Yep. And also this weekend, Madeira Island Ultra Trail, where Katie and Germa will be making their re-debut as on athletes after re-signing with the brand who gave them their start as professional athletes back in 2018 or so. Any other comments on Katie and Germa before we move on?
No, just really excited to watch them race. I do love that they are racing a bunch of the same events this year. Madeira, kind of a petite hard rock, and then being at Hard Rock in July will be very cool to see. And then hopefully the stars align for everyone to be at UTMB at the end of the year, or they'll go to Reunion. That's just very excited to see kind of how everything settles for them.
Yeah. And thus concludes free agency season. I think.
I hope so.
Maybe now we transition and talk about this Warner Brothers Discovery deal with the Golden Trail World Series, because this is also big news. And Matt Walsh at the Trail Mix newsletter did a great job of contextualizing it. I think it'd be fun to bat this back and forth because, as I said before we got started, it feels like this is one of those pieces of news that like you and I recognize as a big deal, and Matt Walsh obviously recognizes as a big deal, but that maybe casual trail fans don't really understand the implications of it. Do you want to get us started on this?
Yeah, I think that I don't know that it's that different from their Eurosport deal that they had last year. And the Eurosport deal felt like a big stepping stone, right? It was Greg has been working to make this a TV ready product with the way they form courses, with the flower petal kind of idea, keeping it viewer friendly with the amount of time that athletes are running. How do you turn that into a TV ready product? I think Eurosport helped to shape a lot of that. And I think Greg, coming from a mountain biking background, understood what that takes from the World Cup level of things. But interestingly, I think early in Matt's newsletter about it, they did say that Eurosport was already applying pressure to keep, races to 2 hours or less. And in my mind, I can't imagine that any other streaming platform is going to feel differently about that. I think the biggest bit is that it does continue to extend their broadcast distribution as far as countries that can stream it. I did not try to watch Kobe this past weekend. I don't know in the US what that would look like exactly, but I do know that there was maybe some issues streaming it in the UK without, then going in on another streaming investment, which I don't know, feels like a backwards move in a way too. We've seen those struggles happen with track and field, for example, with many things going behind a paywall. And just, is that, what is the best thing for the sport? Obviously, dollars are important. For streaming is important because it brings dollars to the sport. It's a huge investment. But does it limit your audience reach when everything is behind a paywall? And I think that those are at odds with one another, and just trying to figure out, are you trying to get new fans or trying to encourage the current fans to follow?
Yeah, you're right. So there's two business models really in broadcasting, one that's ad supported, one that's subscriber supported. And the trade-offs are exactly as you mentioned. Those that are ad supported reach larger audiences. Those that are, but obviously have the trade-offs of having a lot of advertisements. And then those that are viewer supported, subscriber supported, generally won't reach as large of an audience and therefore are a little bit less attractive for investment. But this is a broadening of the deal with Eurosport. So just for our viewers and listeners, Eurosport and the Golden Trail World Series have had a broadcasting deal for, I think, the last 2 seasons. Warner Bros. Discovery owns Eurosport. So effectively what this is, from my interpretation, is the Golden Trail World Series partnering with the global footprint of Warner Brothers rather than just more of the European footprint of Eurosport. And that's a big deal. And it comes off the heels of them expanding into the Asian market last year with races in Japan and China. We're in the middle of that double right now, which we'll talk about in a second. But what Matt says in his newsletter basically is that the series itself has a global footprint now between the US, this year in Mexico too, so Latin America, Asia, in China and Japanese markets, and of course there are several races in Europe. And with that global footprint, you need global distribution, which is what Warner Brothers Discovery provides. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, as Matt notes in the Trail Mix newsletter, and that I know you're very familiar with the World Cup mountain biking circuit. So maybe you can share a little bit of that with the audience.
Yeah, I think that for those familiar with the World Cup mountain biking circuit, it was for the longest time streamed by Red Bull TV. I have woken up at all hours of the day and night in order to watch the Red Bull TV stream of the UCI Mountain Biking World Cup. Following my, then boyfriend, now husband, as he was traveling around the world to race, but me being in school or being home, it was free. It was easy. I think the commentators became these key characters in the field, and it created this sense of community and camaraderie that I think was really wonderful and incentivized people to tune in. The change to this new streaming, it was a big letdown for a lot of folks because I think they weren't bringing the commentators forward with them for the most part. It was going to be a different team. They were changing maybe the way things were run on the weekend. They were bringing in other things, coalescing kind of between the mountain bike, enduro, and cross country side of things. But it was going to make viewership more difficult for people who are used to this free viewership. This year, maybe most dramatically, Warner Brothers Discovery, who is not, I will say, the title sponsor of the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup, decided that the podium ceremony needed to go from 5 riders to 3 riders. They are not the UCI. They are not the governing body. They are not the race promoter, but they were the ones pushing to remove 2 positions from the podium. Historically, making like the flower ceremony, making the podium ceremony as top 5 is really, really important, both for smaller factory teams, and it gives you something to fight for, particularly in seasons where there's been one dominant rider, a la Julian Absalon, a la Nino Schurter, who basically won weekend after weekend after weekend. So having those 4th and 5th spots are incredibly critical for riders making money in the sport, for visibility of smaller brands. You're not the Trek or the Specialized factory team. How are you getting eyeballs on your team, on your sponsors? And so that was a very weird move.
Do we know why they pushed for that?
You got to keep things within a commercial friendly thing, right? But Kate Courtney, who's ostensibly your neighbor.
Kate Courtney's post, that was sort of like protesting this decision.
Yes, and they had I think 100+ riders from the World Cup sign a letter to Warner Brothers Discovery, being like that, basically stating all those things. And it was just kind of interesting because they are not the governing body, they're not the presenting sponsor, they are not the UCI. So why were they allowed to make this decision or change how things were run? And I don't know if that was a miscommunication on someone's part. I hope it's been rectified. And I even brought up on her Instagram post about it that that's not just in mountain biking. For a biathlon, for example, top 6 make the flower ceremony. And that is honestly really important. It's a big deal to make the flower ceremony. It's not just about being 1, 2, or 3. Making the flowers is a huge career moment for many, many athletes. So those 4, 5, and 6 positions mean a lot. It means visibility. It means sponsorship dollars, particularly in sports where, your national governing body supported maybe even. And so you really do need those eyeballs. So it was just like a weird kind of kerfuffle over the previous kerfuffles of like it no longer being free, the commentating team changing. Now all of a sudden this streaming agency trying to make, race day decisions felt very off for many people.
Yeah, I think it's representative of what happens when sports grow and people recognize business opportunities within them who don't necessarily understand the traditions that make the sport special. And I wonder how Warner Brothers Discovery reacted to the protests of Kate Courtney and her colleagues, encouraging them to reevaluate this shrinking of the podium presentation and the consequences that it has downstream to athletes, developing athletes, factory teams, sponsors, etc. But I think that's sort of part of the learning process, right? Is they're probably, let's just shrink it from 5 to 3. Usually podiums are 3 people, without really understanding the tradition inherent in that and the significance inherent to that as it relates to, both the economy of mountain biking, but also sort of like this sentimentality and the spirit and just the tradition that what makes sport special.
Yeah. So I think it's really, really important to kind of continue to ask those questions. And I think the bigger concern for me in reading this is that this is another step towards the 2032 potential Olympic inclusion of trail and ultra running, and recognizing what is the sport that is actually going to make the Olympics. Because I think people think it's going to be this grandiose point-to-point mountainous 100-mile race. And it's like, sweetheart,
perfect
it's
segue.
not. It's not going to be that.
Yeah. All right. I took a little clip here from Matt's newsletter. I'm just going to read it here and then ask you to respond, and we can talk about this Olympic conversation and its implications. So what Matt says in the newsletter is, this partnership also ties into a potential third phase to Solomon's plans for trail running to get the sport in the 2032 Olympics. Scott Mellon, Global Chief Brand Officer for Sullivan, explained to me in an exclusive interview that Sullivan are approaching this in a three-pronged attack. The first is Sullivan's relationship with the IOC through their premium partnership status at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympic Games in 2026. The second is the partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery, who hold broadcast rights to the Olympic Games between 2026 and 2032. And the third is the development of the racing format with Warner Brothers Discovery to make the sport Olympics appropriate. Go ahead.
I hate the phrase Olympics appropriate so much. It makes me cringe. And you've seen it with skimo, the inclusion of skimo into Milan Cortina, the next Winter Games. We had protests this year on the Skimo World Cup where, prominent skimo athletes refused to start one stage because it's not the sport it's not skimo to them.
Yeah.
They have contrived a whole new discipline, the sprint discipline within skimo, to be Olympic friendly, to be an Olympic format, to create engaging TV in a 3-minute race. When climbing came into the Olympics, what did that do? They had to reimagine it from Tokyo to Paris. They did make some changes, but it's watching boulderers try to speed climb is absolutely hilarious, and vice versa. And so they took 3 disciplines and combined it into one sport at the Olympics the first time around. And they had to make changes to that because it didn't make a lot of sense for speed climbing, bouldering, and lead climbing to all be combined into one singular sport when they really truly are separate specialties. So they've kind of coalesced around bouldering and lead climbing being a total point score. But the sports that make it into the Olympics are oftentimes not the sports that we fell in love with. Mountain biking, and Greg Volation knows better than anyone. He watched, the changes in cross-country mountain biking, in which, what is cross-country mountain biking now? It is 90 minutes around a looped course. They determine how many loops the men or women are going to do. Generally, the women do one less loop because it equates to 90 minutes. And sometimes they mess it up and the women's race ends up being too long, and then they shorten the men's race for the next day, which is always funny when that happens. But it's a man-made course. It's looped. It's 90 minutes. It fits into a viewer and streaming friendly platform and format. It's commercial friendly, and it allows for fans to be in a very tight area. And so what Olympic appropriate, what that means for trail running is not some cool big mountainous stage. It is going to be the classic mountain up and down. It is going to be the flower petal format. It is going to be no more than 2 hours of race time, because anything longer than that is not Olympic friendly. You've seen them cut the longer race walking disciplines. If the women's marathon was any longer than it was, they probably would have shortened the distance.
Triathlon
that is
similar too.
Like sprint triathlon. So I do think that Olympic appropriate is the best way it could possibly be phrased, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the cyclocross equivalent of trail running, and that's fine. And we can create heroes out of it, and it's going to be exciting and dynamic. I love the Cirque Series races. They are a great format for this type of thing. I am entertained by Golden Trail World Series, but they are making specifically man-made and contrived courses in certain locations when it isn't with a pre-existing race, in order to be even more TV and spectator friendly. And that's the nature of making it into the Olympic quote unquote appropriate or caliber sport.
Yeah. Very well said, Corinne. I agree with everything you just mentioned. It's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it will likely be a different product than what you and I are mostly familiar with when we think about professional trail running. And we're probably getting a preview of it with a lot of the Golden Trail World Series events that have happened, most of which are extremely exciting, including the race that happened in Japan last weekend, that flower petal format, the distances, the length of the races. You know, they've obviously walked away from the Mont Blanc Marathon, which is the longest race by distance and time this year. Maybe that's a reflection of their desire to shorten the format to make it more TV and spectator friendly in service of this grand Olympic vision. And if trail running were to get into the Olympics, as a lot of people have hypothesized for a long time, it would obviously be a huge moment for the sport in terms of legitimacy, in terms of being in the sport, the consciousness of sporting fans globally, in terms of drawing new sponsorship attention, in terms of drawing new media attention. But at the same time, that product that people will have as their first touch point will have no resemblance to races like Western States or Hard Rock or Barkley or Tour de France. And I mean, that's one of the things that makes the sport so beautiful and so interesting, is that it can be experienced in so many different ways. And maybe this new kind of Olympic feeling format is just another manifestation of that phenomenon. The trail running is just a very diverse sport.
Yeah, and it'll be curious to see if and how does the Olympic version of the sport shape the rest of the sport. For mountain biking and skimo, the answer is yes. It has shaped the sport. For climbing, sort of in the sense that, like, if you're competing on the World Cup level, that is a specific sport. It's brought it into more urban gym spaces, which is amazing, but people are still climbing in Yosemite, and that is not the Olympic sport. And so I do think that you're going to see maybe trail and ultra running is that, right? We still have our Western States, our UTMBs, our Hard Rocks, our Bears, our Wasatches, our Mount Fujis, et cetera, that are cultural hubs of trail and ultra running, particularly the ultra side of trail and ultra running, versus the Olympic discipline. And that might mean that we get to be fans of an Olympic discipline, but it doesn't necessarily shape our personal careers. We're too old. We're too old for the Olympic format.
Yeah,
which we have heard from like Sasha, some of these climbers, right, who were really talented boulders.
Julian,
has said, like, oh, the Olympic sport is not for me. Those kids do gymnastics. Like, those kids do gymnastics on the wall. Like, it is a different style. Like, I can't do that. And so it is very interesting to see how it will continue to grow and shape.
Yeah, I think the most similar analog is triathlon, where the Olympic triathlon is, well, they call it the Olympic distance. And then ITU, the series that most of those athletes compete in non-Olympic years, is a fun, fast, engaging watch. Like, it's a cool sport, but it's different from the Ironman side of the sport, the 70.3s or the full Ironman distance, or like the T100. Et cetera. And so, it's a little bit fragmented. It's a little bit hard to understand if you're not in the weeds, but each of the different formats bring a little bit of something different and entertaining to the fold. And in my opinion, as a casual triathlon fan, there seems to be room for all of them. So maybe that's something that we can expect in trail running too.
And we do see, the heroes that transition over, right? The Taylor Knibb making her Ironman debut, but also be, like coming off an Olympic career, or we'll do a little bit of that Olympic distance, but is mostly now coming into T100 or, competing in the Ironman World Championships. And that's an evolution of the sport as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, big news for the Golden Trail World Series. In fact, Matt also says in his newsletter that what we're witnessing is nothing short of trail running's coming of age moment on the global sporting stage. Big words from Matt Walsh, who is an expert on these media rights deals and, the business of sport in general. So go subscribe to the Trail Mix newsletter if you haven't. I'll put a link in the show notes. The Golden Trail World Series did kick off last weekend in Japan. So maybe we can just tick through a couple of these results before we get to other pieces of news. Patrick Kipnano picked up where he left off. Another W here in 2025 to kick off his season, followed by Philemon Kiriago and Bogdan Damian running at the top three. Behind them, Joey Hadrin and Ryan Suki Omi, the top Japanese athlete. Those were our top five. The women's race, Sarah Alonso, big W for her, the Spaniard. Manalina Floria in second, Malin Osa third, Takako Takamura, Japanese athlete in fourth, and Sarah Wilhoit from the UK in fifth. Corinne, any comments or reactions on the start of the Golden Trail World Series?
Yeah, some kind of exciting up-and-comers making their way into the top five there. The young Swiss athlete, I believe, was at Mammoth last year, and we were like, who is this kid? He ran the VK. But that, I think, is probably one of his best to-date performances on the Golden Trail World Series stage. So really exciting to see that. I think he's a medical student, if I remember correctly, from last year. And then to see Sarah Alonso back kind of at full strength. I know that last year felt like an abridged season for her. She came off some stress fractures after moving from Sullivan to ASICS. Didn't really get to maybe have her shining debut ASICS year. So very excited to see her throw down here and win in a decisive manner. She wasn't here to ease back into things. She was there to take names. And then really excited to see Malinosa, following in Sarah Alonso's footsteps in a lot of ways. Another young soccer playing Spanish runner, really, made a splash last year with some podium finishes, mixing it up with the big dogs. And
I think she was third overall in the World Series.
Yeah, like very consistent performer. I don't think she got any like that big win that she's very capable of. She had a really hard year last year though, too. I think her mom passed away. And so I think it was a very tumultuous season for her. So to see her come out swinging hard in third, obviously Madalena had a slow start to her season last year, came on strong at the end, made a big move from Solomon to Scott, which was super interesting. So that podium feels predictable, but also an exciting way to kick off the season.
Yeah. The big surprise to me was Bogdan Damian, a guy I've never heard of previously, finishing on the podium there in Japan, a Romanian athlete. So Madalena Floria, two Romanians on the podiums.
Yeah. And I guess the big one is how did Joyce do?
She was sixth.
Okay.
Yeah. Which was interesting, obviously coming off the win of the overall series in 2024, probably not the season opener that she wanted here in 2025, especially starting with a new partner, but still in the mix very much. And who knows how training has been for her through the winter months. And I guess we'll probably get probably get a second crack this weekend at the Great Wall Race in China, which we can talk about in a second. But the Golden Trail World Series is off to the races. I find this, even irrespective of sometimes they use the flower formats, etc. I just find the level of competition in these races, the way they cover them, especially on social media, to be really compelling, really good for the sport, very exciting. And I feel like it's sort of not the proving ground, but like when you're looking for tomorrow's champions, tomorrow's, household names in trail running, they're likely going to be found in the top 10s of the Golden Trail World Series events.
Yeah, what I think is really important about the Golden Trail World Series is that it creates density in the sport, and it does so by being the de facto short sub-ultra trail racing. There are obviously like World Mountain Running Association events exist, and the East African athletes will kind of dabble in both. But for the most part, right, they've created a de facto series that if you want to show up with the best of the best, if you want to be sponsored in the sport and you're running below the 50K distance, it is the Golden Trail World Series that you need to be a part of. It's not the World Mountain Running Association. It's not any of those other events. It is this. And so the density factor, I think, creates that hype and excitement. And I do think that the longer distances are punished for being dilute because we have in one weekend, several events that are all quote unquote high quality. The Gorge weekend was a prime example of that, where you had Gorge, Lake Sonoma, and Desert Rats all out west, all the same weekend. And there were a number of reasons why the fields got split, but it split the field in a way where I would have loved to see some of those athletes all together at Gorge. I would love to see some of those athletes all together at Desert Rats. And so
it's such a good point, Corinne.
It split the competition.
I think this brings us back to the broader conversation of Warner Brothers Discovery, Salomon, Golden Trail World Series, because you'll remember in the early years of the Golden Trail events, it was almost uniformly Salomon athletes on the podium. And this year, you may have even noticed on Instagram, last week, they just did individual posts for the team members of different brands. So it's still
I saw that.
The Golden Trail World Series powered by Salomon. Salomon, I think, is still the majority owner of this sporting property that is the Golden Trail World Series. But recognizing the fact that it becomes a more valuable property if they have all the investment of the different brands. So Brooks and Nike, Adidas, Terex, the North Face, Hoka, etc. That it appears like, again, like you're saying, the de facto short distance consolidated place to race for short distance athletes and developing athletes as they try and make their crack as professional athletes. And now all the brands recognize it too, of like, hey, I'm recruiting this young up and coming athlete who may have a background as a collegiate cross country racer or, a European ski mountaineering athlete, and they're just coming into trail. We're going to sign them and we're going to funnel them directly into this one racing property, Golden Trail, rather than into this hyper fragmented racing environment with independent ultra marathons like Gorge Waterfalls, the UTMB World Series, the World Trail Majors, etc. So they do have that advantage of like really owning the short distance, right?
Yeah, and to the expense of the kind of reconfigured skyrunning World Series, right? Which used to have multiple disciplines, i.e. like extreme, long, and short, or maybe it was like extreme, normal, and VK. Like that's basically gone by the wayside, and they've World Skyrunning Series has, reconfigured around one kind of consistent race distance, more or less. But again, there's like too many races in that series and they're all over the place. And while Merrill has invested a lot, I think, into it, again, still the de facto short distance thing has become Golden Trail World Series with the most brand buy-in and reward for athletes competing in it.
Yeah. Well, very interesting to just chat through all of this as Golden Trail World Series kicks off last weekend in Japan and now has stop number 2 in China, the Great Wall Race this coming weekend. We're playing that in fantasy, so make sure you go check that out. We won't preview the whole race here, but this is actually a good point here, Corinne. This weekend we're playing 4 races in fantasy. It's a fantasy quadfecta on fantasy.freetrail.com. The Great Wall Race, Golden Trail World Series, the Canyons 100K, the Canyons 50K, and the Madeira Island Ultra Trail, all under, so 4 races under 3 race organizations. So again, it's easy for the 2 of us to keep track of it, but I think for the casual trail running fan, they're probably like, what the hell? And the Golden Trail World Series benefits by being very clear about the product that they provide, that being very exciting short distance racing. So anyway, any other comments on that stuff? I think we spend the rest of our time just talking through some of the other race results that happened recently.
Yeah, no, I think that we're in a good spot with the Golden Trail World Series. I will say too that while Salomon has the biggest team investment into Golden Trail World Series, I don't know that they were the team that came out on top, which I think is also really cool to see other brands really being present and prevalent and taking those podium spots as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Really fun to chat through that together, Corinne. Maybe next let's talk about our mutual friend, Abby Hall.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
I knew you had early awareness of and were under embargo for too. So fill the listeners in.
Yeah. So we have we are looking at Canyons Week right now. Obviously you're going to listen to this on Monday of Canyons Week. We're not previewing Canyons today. There are 6 more tickets. The 6 final tickets are on the line this upcoming weekend in the 100K, but we had a fun announcement last week where Abby Hall, after 225 kilometers of racing, 9 weeks after Black Canyon, found out that EmKay Sullivan's ticket would be rolling to her. And I think there's a lot of speculation. It got leaked maybe before EmKay and Tommy were ready to put anything out online. It got leaked by a numerous trail enthusiasts. And I was like, man, we're outing EmKay before she's ready. I, at that point, knew that EmKay was pregnant and was like waiting to talk to Craig and then waiting to announce. And we weren't sure if the ticket was going to roll to Abby because EmKay was this exciting but interesting double whammy in which for the golden tickets, if the elite who has a golden ticket has to decline before May 1st, that ticket is supposed to roll to the next eligible person up to 5th or 6th, depending on the if it is a 2-ticket race or a 3-ticket race. But because it's a pregnancy deferral, because it was due to pregnancy, she also gets a pregnancy deferral, i.e. when she is ready to come back to Western states, she has a spot in Western states. And so it wasn't clear, I think, on the outside if that pregnancy deferral would also be granted the golden ticket roll down opportunity. Yeah. And I think it is very important that it was, because that protects, an equal number of men and an equal number of women coming into Western states via the golden ticket pipeline. That does really help cement our elite field and create parity in those fields by gender. And so I knew that she was going to approach Craig. We were waiting to hear what Craig was going to say. And then I was like, I got the news that Craig was going to let the ticket roll to Abby. And then I was like, oh my goodness, have you called Abby? And EmKay got to call Abby to tell her. And apparently Abby was like sitting on a rock at the top of the Grand Canyon, having gone for a run with her husband, Cordis, and really good friend, Lucy Bartholomew, who's in town. And I can't imagine being Abby, like sitting on a rock being like, I thought this might happen and I wasn't sure if it was going to. I think she'd been given some cryptic messages earlier that week and she was getting her hopes up. So I'm glad that her hopes came true. And it's a congratulations for both parties. It's not like, so EmKay's out due to injury. Like, oh no, it's like, no, like EmKay and Tommy and the dogs are so excited to welcome a baby boy into the household in October, and Abby Hall has found her way back into Western states.
And she wanted it so bad. Did you mention about how she was just out? I mean, obviously she was just out of the tickets at Black Canyon, and also
3 minutes at Black Canyon, and
went to Chianti, wanted it there too.
Finished 4th, not in the golden ticket. Like, and I was like, wait, maybe that one was going to roll because like, was Azara going to take it if Fiona didn't? Like, oh no. So to see the ticket roll to Abby, and I was hopeful that she'd be excited about it. I think that there was a small chance that she's like, you know what, not in the cards this year. I gave it my best swing. That's okay. Like, yada. No, totally. But I think that I had a tiny bit of worry that she wasn't going to be absolutely thrilled about it. And I called her as soon as I heard that EmKay had called her. Yeah. And I called her from a trailhead in Issaquah, and I was like, hi. And she's like, oh, hi. Like, she knew I knew. It was great. And what I told her was, your Black Canyon run was golden ticket worthy. Yeah. Like, I just want to remind you that what you did at Black Canyon was deserving of a golden ticket. You ran so well there and you almost got it. And then I was like, and I'm so proud of you for showing up to Chianti and like swinging in a really hard, muddy day. And it's just not coming all together. You like, this was, you are deserving of having put the work in to get this golden ticket. And so I'm really excited for her. She raced it in 2021, ran okay, but not to the level that she can. And I hope that this Western States can be that thing for her, because while she has crushed the 100K, the 100-mile like perfect day has kind of eluded her historically.
Famously.
Via Leadville, Western States. Yeah.
2-time golden hour finisher at Leadville.
Yes. Abby will finish Western States, but I hope that means that she's finishing, a sub 18 hours, throwing down with the big dogs and well into the women's top 10. Oh. So thrilled for her.
You know where my big dumb brain goes?
Where?
What if Abby wins Western States?
I would
a story it would
be sobbing on the track. You know that I will be sobbing.
It would be so good. So I just want to read the last couple paragraphs of her post here for the audience, because I think it's great. She says, the best news, which some of you may have already seen, is that the ticket rolls down to me because EmKay Sullivan is pregnant. She gets to defer her entry through Western States pregnancy deferral option. She called and shared the news with me over the weekend. It was such a beautiful passing of the baton, if you will, and I'm so inspired watching an incredible athlete like EmKay enter this new season of her own as she becomes a mother. I believe we end up exactly where we're meant to be, and I truly believe this is where I'm supposed to be this year. Keep betting on yourself, keep being scrappy, and don't throw in the towel. You never know what might be waiting for you. Hell yeah. Congrats to EmKay and Tommy on the expansion of the family, and congrats to Abby Hall for a well-deserved spot on that Western States start list. And now a great 100K in her legs in February, a great 120K in her legs in March. She's going to be ready. Like, now she's got a time to build and take a big swing at Western States. Yeah. So look out. You know, I think this might be a graceful transition. One of the things I was thinking about is how Adam Peterman and Abby, they sort of remind me of each other in certain ways, in that they both sort of had serious injuries and they both have been sort of working back towards the top. When Abby experienced her injury, she had just, you know, she had won Madeira. She was 2-time podium performer at CCC. Like, she was on top of the world. Peterman, of course, a world champion, Western States champion. And coming back from those injuries, it just takes time to build the fitness back. So that was my graceful way to sort of, I think what we can do as we wind down is take the other races that happened 2 weekends ago, Gorge, Lake Sonoma, Desert Rats. We can button them together, get a few top line headlines from those before we wind down. You want to get us started? Because you were at Desert Rats. I was obviously at Gorge. Meanwhile, there's a big race happening here in NorCal with Lake Sonoma.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Yeah, Desert Rats didn't maybe have the deepest of fields. We saw the Hemming duo win the 21K with Tabor and Eli taking the wins. We saw the moms throw down in the 50K, which was really freaking cool. Allison Baca runs her second sub 4 hour 50K of the season as she preps for UTMB. Like, that's terrifying.
So she's doing the full UTMB? Because that's one of my notes that I've written down is like,
I am under the impression that she is doing the full
really watch right now.
The full UTMB. Yep. She got her spot by winning the 100K at Valderon last year. And I think she requested to go up to the 100K distance. So, or the 100-mile distance at UTMB. So I believe she's doing the full loop this year, which is really, really exciting. For those of you who don't remember, she was 6th at Worlds in Innsbruck in 2023. She's had not her best day at Western States, but she's a mama who can throw down in the 100-mile distance, and she's really good at downhills. She's really strong in the mountains. So looking for big things. I think the Hemmings might coach her, actually, which is really fascinating and really cool. Ashley Brosovin finished second. I want to say that they were like 2nd and 4th overall or something in their podium moves. This is not Ashley's first race back post-pregnancy, but I want to say her kiddo is under a year old. So cool to see Ashley back at that 50K distance running really, really fast as well. And then in third, the continuation of triathlon taking over our sport is very exciting. Sophie Lynn, who is a friend of Riley Brady and Claire Gallagher, represented Australia at the Paris Olympics in the Olympic triathlon discipline, raced her first 50K. Yes, raced her first 50K, finishing third. And not a shabby time at all. Wasn't that far behind Ashley. So really cool to see Sophie Lynn making her move into trail, hopefully. So,
hey, speaking of triathlon, Eric Lagerstrom's running the Canyons 50K this weekend. He's coming on the pod soon, but anyway, he's another data point in this trend on the men's side.
Yeah, super, super cool. I am not sure if he understands that if he does well here, this will qualify him for the 2026 Canyons versus UTMB versus 2025. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know that we've completely understood the concept of time here, but I'm really excited to see Eric race at Canyons. It's going to be, the 50K is a burner. I think the 100K side, I want to give a big shout out to Lottie Brinks, who like threw down in the 100K.
She won by an hour.
Yeah, just looked happy all day. It was really fun to get to see her out on course. I was more tired than she was, I'm pretty sure. I had to take a 90-minute nap after volunteering out at the aid station because I was toast, but just really, really cool racing across the board there. Desert Rats was brutal. It was like 85 degrees, full sun. Yep. I think this past weekend it was like 45 and raining. So you never know what you're going to get, but was cool to be out there while I had internet the whole time. I had cell service, and you bet your bottom dollar that I was refreshing the Gorge results while I was out there trying to figure out what was happening. So That was pretty cool.
We missed you at Gorge, Corinne. We missed you at Gorge.
I missed being
Thanks for
there.
that update for Desert Rats. And yeah, nothing to add from my perspective, except for the fact
Brian
that
Whitfield won the 50K and he ran really well, and he will be going for a world spot at Broken Arrow. So
yeah, he's
Brian's
stud.
mega talented.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I was going to add is that for some reason, the half marathon was like the most competitive race at Desert Rats.
Little Sunday bop. It was great.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because like, obviously those names that Hemmings, Jeschrin, Small, and now I'm forgetting who else was in the race, but it was like a really solid 21K. And of course, brands probably have bonuses for winning by UTMB events. These athletes probably view it as a good opportunity to have a hard training day as they build towards races like Canyons, which both Eli, Tabor, Jeschrin, etc. are going to be
It's
running.
all relatively local for them too, right?
Yeah.
Like they could drive over for the weekend, they could drive over for the day. It wasn't a huge commitment for any of them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, yeah. Peterman is back, moving to Gorge. Freaking amazing run, going sub 8 at Gorge Waterfalls, breaking Vincent Bouillard's course record by almost 30 minutes. Savage performance. It was a perfect day, we should say, where Vincent had horrific rainy conditions. It was very fast and the trails were in very good shape. Shea Aquilano.
I love her.
Me too. She's 23 years old.
I've known this for forever. I've been cheering her on since she was 19.
The mom's side of my family are big Notre Dame people. So by osmosis, I'm like a Fighting Irish fan. Mm-hmm. And so it gives it double points. Obviously for our viewers and listeners, Shea competed collegiately for the University of Notre Dame. So anyway, I'm a huge fan of Shea Aquilano, and she also broke the course record by 20 minutes. Freaking awesome race from Trayson Knopp, who got, wire to wire. Yeah, one wire to wire. Trayson Knopp, best race of his life by his own admission, finishing in second place, only like 7 or 8 minutes behind Adam. And then on the women's side, Jade Bellsberg was second, which means the red, white, and blue ticket, because Jade's has dual citizenship, but she's racing for Canada. That red, white, and blue ticket rolled to Claire Rhodes. And so maybe the story of the weekend, Trayson Knopp and Claire Rhodes, obviously partners themselves from Anchorage, Alaska, both representing Team USA.
In Claire's first 100K, which is a big deal.
They're both 26 too, like
young guns.
Jeez, man. Jeez.
Yeah. Also, just want to give a shout out to Philip Royer, who we all missed in our previews, I'm pretty sure. Threw down in his first ever 100K. I looked at his ultra sign up mid-race to like make sure it was legit, and then texted Liam, and I was like, is this guy legit? Like, his ultra sign up is kind of meh. Like, who is this guy? And like, he filled me in, which was great, because I was watching, obviously, my fan favorite, Jeff Colt, and he and Philip were really close together. And I was like, who's this Philip guy? What's the deal here? And was very, very curious to see what happened, but just, it was cool to watch from afar. What a good race on both sides. Some excellent names being added to that world's team. And then we'll get to cover it in like another 10 days, because that team announcement will happen April 30th. Yep.
Yeah. So good. Cool. Well, maybe we can just wind down, maybe a couple words on Lake Sonoma. I think the two things for me, number one, Tara Dower, holy smokes. She, to me, is the next Courtney Dauwalter. Where she can win a fast 50K or be second at Black Canyon and get a golden ticket to Western States. So has wheels, but then also can break the overall FKT on the Appalachian Trail, a 2,100 mile route. So, the type of person who could win a Western States and finish Barkley, it's such a unique skill set. And I think it's not only talent, but like the mental and like the psychological disposition that she has, the toughness that she has. Like, we'll all remember the iconic photo of her at Javelina when she fell into a cactus and she's just like covered in cactuses and bleeding, etc. I don't know. Tara Dower, I'm a huge fan of hers.
She's been good, but it feels like the Appalachian Trail made her great. And I know that she was very talented before that. I know that she's put together some amazing performances at Run Rabbit, but I feel like, again, you've got performances that solidify your potential, that like make you really, really like self-assured, I think, as opposed to like making you like crack because you feel the pressure of it. I think that it's brought an assuredness to her that is really inspiring and is very exciting.
Yeah. On the men's side of the 50 miler, Stephen Kirsch.
Dad strength.
I'm so pissed. Another example that dad strength exists, and I'm somehow the only person immune from inheriting dad strength when I have a child. But shout out to Kirsch.
He felt the fatigue over those last couple miles when he, in his own words, almost fumbled it.
Really? So
yeah, very exciting run for him, but had pressure applied all the way through the finish line by Ryan Raff and the early leader, Chris Myers. So
yeah,
cool race on the men's side there, and was just
separated by only 3 minutes, the men's podium. So it reminded me, I went back and looked because I knew that there had been a couple of these really tight finishes at Lake Sonoma. So the men's podium in the 50 miler was separated by only 3 minutes this year. You remember in 2014, Corinne, when it was Zach Miller, Rob Crar, Sage Canaday on the men's podium, separated by only 90 seconds. Reminiscent of that. 2019 on the women's side, it was Anna Mae Flynn, Io Wang, Addie Bracey, separated by only 2.5 minutes. So that Lake Sonoma course is such that it keeps those leaders pretty close.
It's changed a little bit over time, but I think the finish, I think the back half of the course runs pretty true to the old course in a lot of ways, and it's a punisher. So very excited to see.
What I mean is courses without like the big monster climbs that inherently usually cause separation, but instead have just like a bunch of small climbs. It just seems like there's a theme at Lake Sonoma where these podiums are quite consolidated, but awesome racing across the board. We are in the thick of racing season, it seems now, as we wind down here and point towards this coming weekend where, as I said, we're playing 4 races in fantasy. Again, the Great Wall race, which is Golden Trail World Series, Madeira Island Ultra Trail, which Katie and Germain are going to be competing at, the Canyons 100K, our final super golden ticket race of the season, building towards Western States, and the Canyons 50K, which might be the 50K of the season here in North America. The Great Wall race and Madeira are already live on the website now. Canyons 100K and 50K should be up not long after this podcast goes up. So go put your picks in, pick 5 deep in all 4 races. And that omits, like the Mount Fuji 100 is happening, I think, this weekend too. So like I said, we're in the thick of it now, Corinne.
We sure are. And we'll be there. So if you're listening to this and you're going to be at Canyons, come hang out with us. We start our shows on Thursday. We got a cool happy hour going on where we've got a little panel to kick things off at happy hour. We got our shakeout run and our shakeout run show. I'm hosting the elite panels Friday afternoon. So you get to hang out with us all weekend, and then we'll just be bopping around the course before we go live for our post-race show on Saturday.
Heck yes. So stay locked and loaded. Tune in. Yeah, we'll put a bunch of information up on Instagram as the week progresses, so you know where to follow the action up there at Canyons. It's going to be a great weekend. Corinne, always fun to bang through some of the news items that are happening in the trail running world, and I can't wait to hang out together up in Auburn this weekend.
Looking forward to it.